Brown says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a priest! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell killer!
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Tip Sheet Podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020. Joining me for another sweltering week in Parradise is my good mate, Sixties, where the gruesome twosome this week, Sixties, no guest host, but still, even with the quiet week in rugby league, and it does feel like a relatively quiet week, chaos is about to break out the next fortnight, and we do have junior reps to talk about, so still plenty to chat. And as always, before we get to it, how you doing, big fella?
Doing really well, mate. And you mentioned about chaos about to break out in the next 16 days. Well, of course, we've got the first games in the preseason challenge, all the junior rep competitions well and truly underway. So there is actually plenty of real football to talk about, not just training. So we'll certainly be doing that. And we're recording a little bit earlier in the day, which meant that we're having to go with just the two of us. But I think we can make our way through it, mate. What do you think?
I think our poor listeners will have to carry that cross this week, and I'm sure we'll try our best to alleviate some of their concerns. But yes, we got some really good football stuff to talk about. Parramatta. It was a fantastic opening week in the junior reps. We'll get to that shortly. Before we do start talking football, we've got our usual round of shout-outs, starting with our sponsors, Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Rowan and Parramatta. We always speak so highly about Greg and the crew for good reason. They've been with TCTs just about day dot 60s, and they continue to support us into our 10th year. Absolutely wild. Greg and the crew are blue and gold, bleeding for sure. And then, as always, a quick shout out for our socials and our little interactions with the various platforms. If you're following us on SoundCloud, on YouTube, on any various podcasting platform, give us a like, a subscribe, and send a listen to some of your other blue and gold fans. It helps with our metrics. And big fella,
And also, if we can, a little bit of a shout out as well to Paraleagues who sponsor our coverage of Eels junior reps, the live match day coverage, and any of our coverage through podcasts. We thank Paraleagues for their support. I mean, they're massive supporters of junior rugby league in the Parramatta district. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars that they invest in junior rugby league, not to mention other junior sport across the district. They're a great community club. We thank them for their support. And I'll just give a bit of a heads up to listeners to stand by for our podcast, which we're recording tomorrow with the president of Parramatta Leagues Club, Greg Monaghan. So we'll be talking with Greg about what's happening at Para Leagues with the Para Live. We'll get a little bit of an update about what's happening around the AGM with regard to some special resolutions that we need people to vote on. And we'll also, of course, have a talk with Greg about the Eels, because not only is the Parramatta Club the Parramatta Leagues Club the owners of the Parramatta Eels, but Greg is an absolutely dyed-in-the-wool, has always been Parramatta Eels supporter, and we've enjoyed many a chat with Greg on match days and up at Eels training when he gets up there and has a bit of a look at the boys go through their paces. So we'll be having a chat with him about all of those sorts of things. Recording tomorrow and either out later tomorrow or on the weekend. So look forward to doing that. And John, I think that just about gets us to throwing to the news.
News team, assemble!
Well, John, I'm going to start off with talking about Eels training, and just as a comment, very early on, we had the Eels NRLW Assistant Coach, Kate Mullaly, there earlier this week helping out with training. And just as what happened with the Eels junior representative coaches being involved in preseason training and taking that back to their respective teams, we have the Eels, as I said, the Eels assistant NRLW coach involved out there as well. So it was great to see that. She was involved in the drills, and we're looking at that, I guess, that one club philosophy creed in action at the Eels training. So that was fantastic. Obviously, there's the training reports. I'm not going to go into any great depth about training when I've already got the training reports that are coming out. But, John, I emphasised this week about defence and the changes in defence.
Yep.
And that was able to be backed up by a bit of a quick chat I had with Scott Wisemantle today about how good the defence was through the week. So that was great validation there with that. It's obviously it's been an emphasis. I mean, let's face it, it's half of the game, isn't it? You got your attack, you got the defence. Teams that win competitions are virtually on a yearly basis one of the best defending teams in the competition, and so an obvious focus for the Eels had to be to improve their defence. How they've gone about improving the defence, well, I'm not going to talk about, because that's obvious. That would be
some trade secrets right there. Yeah.
A trade secret. Yeah. And look, that's the fine line that I have to walk with training reports, is that I'm an Eels supporter. I'm trying to share information with fellow Eels supporters throughout the preseason, but I also have to walk that fine line of not giving too much away.
Exactly.
And
that balance between connecting fans to the team, but also not harming the team against its competitors.
That's exactly right. And you know, sometimes when there's things that you really appreciate seeing, it's hard not to share information about it. And I try to have a voice in my head which says, would an opposition team like to have a bit of intel about this? And if the answer to that is yes, then it doesn't go in the reports. So, it is a bit of a balancing act. But you know, I don't think it's giving away anything to say that the Eels' defence had to improve coming into this season, though sat right down at the bottom of the competition when it came to, well, not just ladder position, but the record in defence.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw how many times in the last 15, 20 minutes of games that the defence would wilt. Now, the reasoning behind that is debatable. You know, I've said my piece where I believe that the skills levels of the team had dropped, and there were far too many errors, which then compounded, put pressure on the team and the team's defence, and it just built up, and then it was like you get to that last 20 minutes and you got a problem. But you know, there may be different opinions about why it's come about. The fact is, it's there. The coaches have had to come in, identify how they can improve that. They've done that. They've worked on it. As an observer, I'm seeing a big difference there. Now, whether that translates into, you know, NRL game time, that's obviously what we're going to start to find out, be it through the trials or in the early rounds of the premiership. And however it goes early on, it has to hold out for the rest of the season.
Exactly. And translating paddock form to field form isn't always a one-to-one. We know that, not just with the Parramatta Eels. There's been plenty of teams, and that's hence why the meme is, you know, the hardest preseason ever. That you know, every coach is out there, whether they're a great coach or a mediocre coach, they're out there flogging their charges and trying to get them fit and in, you know, position. But yeah, making that jump from the training paddock to the field is a lot different. What I will say, 60s, is I am optimistic, not just from your reports and the general vibe, just like looking at the Eels in the media, like they're radiating a lot of energy right now. But just looking at the depth of the club right now, it feels like the New South Wales Cup is in a much stronger position than it has been for a number of years. And as the old adage goes of iron sharpening iron, when your cup team can actually challenge your NRL team and in both sides of the ball, both offensively and defensively, it should theoretically make your NRL team stronger.
Yes, absolutely. Now, the interesting thing is, and I'll be fairly candid about this, is that when I look at the at the roster, I think that if everyone's fit and well, it's a team which should be able to challenge for finals football. But we know injuries happen. Now, we've probably got enough NRL experience depth to cover a couple of backline injuries. You don't want it to go too deep. Now, the reasoning behind that is you'd love the group of players that are there right now at New South Wales Cup level. First of all, the competition for places is at that level is going to be tough. There will be players who will be unlucky to miss a spot at that level. But you'd also like the players at that level to have another year or two behind them for selection at NRL level. Now, there might be a couple that end up being selected ahead of, in quotation marks there, ahead of their time. And, for a couple of them, like Richie Penasini and Artie Miller-Stephen, they would have arguably been at the stage you'd want them at now, were it not for missing the entire year last year due to injury. So, but it's interesting looking at it because, as I said, I think it's a talented group of outside backs that are there. You'd love them to have an extra 12 months of experience behind them. They don't. It will be interesting to see how that season pans out in that regard, because I think when we get to this time next year, you're going to be talking about a group of players that'll be putting pressure on people in the first grade team for positions in first grade. Look, that's probably all I want to say, except for the fact that we're really at the end of pre-season training as such. Now, what that will mean is that for my pre-season training reports, I'll probably wrap it up this week. I might come back with an overview of what's happened throughout the pre-season next week, maybe name some players to watch for the season, those that stood out for different reasons throughout the pre-season, that sort of report. I know, John, you've got your second part of your examination of the rising pathways players. You've already covered the forwards. You're looking at the back.
Yeah, and hopefully an examination of the stocks in the New South Wales Cup as well. That's the two planned articles get out in the next couple of weeks. So a bit of exploration of the periphery of our NRL prospects.
Yeah, so just a reminder that when my training reports are only for covering the pre-season, once they hit in-season timetables and programs, and essentially they start to do that next week because they're preparing for their first trial game, and the training days start to change up. They start to go to in-season schedules with a few things, and I can't really produce the reports anymore. That's just how it is during the season itself. If I'm writing reports on what they're doing at training, I'm telling you how they're preparing for a match against a specific opponent. That's not on. I'm not about to do that. I'll still be at training, but I won't be reporting about it. So just bear that in mind. But, mate, apart from that, that probably wraps up what I want to say about training. Just moving on, we have the fan day. Well, I want to talk about a couple of things around fans. There's actually three things in a row I want to talk about in the news here about fans. First of all, there was the fan day, which was held last Saturday at CommBank Stadium. Now, there's some media floating around, photos from the day, that sort of thing. What I will say, having attended a number of fan days in the past, that this is probably the best venue that they've had for fan day, being CommBank Stadium. Reason behind that, you've got plenty of seating. You've got places where people can go up on the concourse, get a bit of shade if they need to. Just space. Parking wasn't a problem. My message to the club would be, look for this as your permanent venue. And for those that didn't go, well, you missed out on things like being able to do tours of the dressing sheds and the warm-up areas in the stadium, being down on the field. There
was a good reason for some people not to go, though, which we'll get to shortly.
Yes. Plenty of activations for the kids out on the field. Then the players came. They were introduced to the crowd. And then they moved around to some of the activations. They were having photographs and signing autographs and all that sort of stuff. And the whole day wrapped up around about that 1 o'clock mark. But it was really, really good. Shout out to, like, there were lots of people saying hello. But a shout out to, now I'm going to apologise if I get the names wrong, but Max and Sue from Maitland. Max, if I got your name wrong, I apologise, because I was trying to remember in the back of my mind, from Maitland, and Max, like the first name starting with M as well. But I apologise if I get that wrong. But shout out to those two people. We've met them before at Paraleagues when they popped in on match days to say good day when we were doing the podcast. As I said, they'd come down from Maitland. They liked listening to the podcast on their travels. They made sure they said hello to me on the day. We sat down, had a bit of a chat. Really enjoyed that. So just wanted to say g'day to Max and Sue, and thank you for the time on Saturday. Caught up with plenty of other people. One of the most enjoyable catch-ups as well was with Kennedy Cherrington, who, Kennedy is just such an absolutely wonderful ambassador. She was there with Ruben. She dragged Ruben over to say hello. And Ruben, of course, also another great ambassador for the club. The two of them, what a dynamic duo they are, not just on the field for the Eels, but also in their interaction with fans on socials, their podcast. Just great people. They're loyal to the Eels. They've committed to extended contracts at Parramatta. And I was watching later on when the players had moved out to some of the activations around the ground, and Kennedy had just moved off one of the activations, and these young girls saw her walking across the field and went bounding over to her to say hello. And next thing, she's doing some sort of dance with them, and just the look of joy on their face. And I thought, like that sort of level of engagement, and the joy that's brought to the supporters, just with an interaction like that. You've got fans for life with that sort of thing, but it says plenty about how that engagement between players and supporters is so important, which leads me, John, into the next thing that I wanted to talk about. And just before I do, all the players that were there and interacting with the fans, signing autographs, what have you. I got to speak to a few of them, was around as they're, having their photos. I couldn't speak highly enough of them and the way they engage with the fans, which brings me to the next part, which is the club is really looking to make big changes and big improvements in how they connect with fans. And so just the other day, they've announced the Supporter Group Alliance, the SGA, of which I'm very honoured to be part of. This group has been. This isn't something that's just come about, but it's important that it's come to fruition now. The club first started talking about this back in 2023, when the old member council started to, it basically fizzled out to an end. And there's no other way of describing that. And there still had to be a connection between the club and the fans and members. And it had to operate in a better way than the member council was at that time, certainly at the end of its iteration. And so this Supporter Group Alliance has come about. At this stage, there's only 10 of us on the Supporter Group Alliance, but what's going to be examined is how to expand it, how to bring other fans on board, identifying other fans that can come on board. and perhaps then as well, people who were part of the inaugural group, we might stand down, so that it continues to perpetuate and keeps getting fresh ideas in there. John, the idea really is the 10 people that are there at the moment, have come from a diverse background in terms of location for a start. We've got regional and interstate people who are involved with that. So there's representation of people from those sorts of backgrounds. There's representation of people who, through what they do in their support of the Eels, have a lot of connections with supporters. Supporters are able to reach out to them with things that are aspects about their membership or their fan experience that might concern them or that they want answers about. So, or even just suggestions to how to improve their experience as supporters of the Parramatta Eels. So it's really about having a voice, supporters having a voice that's heard. And our meetings involve club executives, so that that it's, look, there's no lip service with this sort of thing. I mean, if you're not going to waste your time of club executives or people who are involved in this if you didn't want it to lead to improvements for supporters, take our club to a better place. So if that was going to be the case, I know I probably wouldn't want to be involved in it. So it's really about, as I said, improving that connection between the club and their members and supporters, and making sure that the voices of members and supporters are heard. So obviously, if anyone wants to reach out about any areas of concern, you can catch me for a start. So it's you can reach out to the Cumberland Throw, but as I said, there are 9 other people that are on the committee, in the supporter group with me. All of our names were in the Eels media release, so please reach out. As I said, it's a diverse group in terms of the background, but everyone involved is a passionate Parramatta Eels supporter, so of that you can be guaranteed. And now it leads me to the next announcement, John, from the Eels, which is they're bringing back the Swarm Bay, that active supporter area for Eels fans at CommBank Stadium. So they've set aside bays 121 and 122. Now, those bays aren't actually in a general admission area, but they've made the prices general admission prices, which is that's a real bonus for people that want to be involved in that active support of the club. Wave the flags, hit the drums, chant, sing, just really engage the crowd and engage the team. So if you want to be involved in that, as the club's media release says, get in touch with their friendly membership team, let them know. And if you've already got a ticket elsewhere but you want to swap it to that, same thing, give them a call. That is possible. So it's the people involved in it, they got to choose what they call it. They overwhelmingly decided they wanted to run with the Swarm, which was the name that was given before. That being like a group of eels, the collective noun for a group of eels. So, anything you wanted to say about that, John?
No, I mean, I'm always happy for, like you said, that active fan base be part of the stadium experience. Helps make CommBank more of a fortress. So, if you're keen on doing that, make sure you get your tickets in the Swarm.
Yeah, so that's down on that first level of the stadium. As I said, bays 121, 122. Check it out. Check out the email, the information about it. But, if you're someone that likes to wave flags and sing along or chant along and make a lot of noise, then that's probably the place for you at CommBank Stadium. Okay, mate. I don't think we're going to touch this. There's more Dylan Brown stuff that's going around. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
excuse
I
me.
think-
I'm sorry. Wait, what? There was a number of headlines this week, all of which constituted to a net nothing. No serious news on Dylan either way, and I think that's not a bad thing for the club. And as far as we can tell, the only serious, I wouldn't even call it serious because it's James Hooper and a couple other people have linked Newcastle to Dylan Brown on money that's pretty much exactly the same as what his current contract is at Parramatta. That's not going to get him away from the club. So I'm not concerned either way. And on that note, we'll move on. Just a quick thing to throw in his 60s because we didn't have it in our run sheet initially. Sean McElduff has stood down from his role as chairman of the football board. He was approaching his final year of tenure as well. So at the end of this season, he would have had to have stepped down anyway. But he steps down after presiding over nearly 10 years of growth for the club. So well done to him there. Obviously, we made the NRL and NRLW grand finals under his watch and also launched the NRLW too. So some big milestones there for Sean. And
also the Centre of Excellence too.
And kickstarting, and not just kickstarting, but helping guide the foundational movement for the Centre of Excellence, which will be launched proper this year as well. So a really big period there for the Parramatta Eels. And we will find out more about his successor at a future point 60s, but Matthew Beach will be taking over this month in February. So he's been on the board since February of 2023. And yeah, he now takes over as chairman. So I'm not sure who's going to actually fill the vacant spot on the board now, but I imagine that the club will have a statement out at some point in the future when that has been dealt with.
Yeah, so just to that news did come out right at the end of last week, and it's something that did need to be discussed. So I'm glad you've raised that, John. And as you mentioned, Sean was now in the last 12 months of the maximum 9-year tenure as being part of the board. So he needed to stand down this year. Matthew is ready to step into that. And just a couple of things on that, because he has been on the board for 2 years already. That means would have a maximum 7 years that he would be there as the chairman of the board. Now, look, I actually think that's something that's good, because you probably don't want a chairman coming in and only being there for like a couple of years, for example. So it was good that he's got that time already on the board, being part of the board, and can continue on what has been important stability in the Parramatta Eels, and that's a key thing, is that after so many years of instability around boards, we have stability around the boards, and this will ensure that sort of continues. And John, just on that, they are actually going through the selection process at the moment to find and appoint a new board member. We also have Vicky Lever, who was the other original board member. Yeah, so Vicky, this is her 9th year with the Eels. She's been a wonderful board member. So we'll give a shout out there to Vicky and thank her for her service. I'm not sure when she'll be standing down, but again, just repeating that Vicky's now in her last year on the board. So this is how these boards work. They have that maximum period that a director can be there, and we have the turnover that happens every few years as people reach their maximum time on the board, and you get not only a period of long-term stability, you also get new people, fresh ideas that come in and are introduced as part of the board moving forward. So there's always, as I said, that stability plus the refresh that happens all the time. So yeah, it's such a big change to how things used to exist with the Eels and the Leagues Club boards. So again, thank you to Sean, and a thank you in advance to Vicky as well. John, that that then leads us to talk about the junior reps from last weekend and also to preview this week's junior reps. John, you've now doing a Monday post where you're looking back on the weekend that was. It's obviously going to extend beyond junior reps once the competition gets underway. And we've got the trials that are now happening, so they will no doubt feature in your Monday reviews that you put up. But you had covered the live blog of the girls' matches down in Canberra. I covered the boys' matches a little bit later against the Knights. If you can just quickly go over the results from the girls and your takes from those matches.
Yeah, Eels on the road to Canberra to start their seasons in the Lisa Fiola and Tashgal Cups. In the Lisa Fiola, they prevailed 34-6, 7 tries to 1. So we had a double to Freedom Crichton Rapati. And then try scorers alongside her were Cody Tuomasevi, Sienna Bonello, Mero Sivo, Kaisen Morgan Pritchard, and Sharon Latapu. Bally Ma Chong and Tamiki Withers split the goal-kicking duties and went 3 from 7 collectively, but I'd have to say that Bailey was not far off in a lot of her attempt 60s. So the record not as kind to her as the kick attempts looked on the game itself. I thought the girls were comfortably better than the Raiders in this 160s, but in saying that, it felt like a classic round one game for the Eels where you see all the potential in the world, but there were a lot of errors and unforced mistakes in the second half that sort of prevented a real blowout of a score. And crazy to say that 34-6 that they didn't win as easily as they should have. But in the second half, there was a lot of forward passes, just being out of sync and out of rhythm in round one and not having everything ironed out. So I'm really interested to see if they can get a lid on those errors and get running on schedule in the coming weeks, because we've seen plenty of talented Parramatta squads in the past sort of be tripped up by that through the course of the rep season, and you want to be on top of that as quickly as possible. And I imagine Ryan Walker will be on that very much. But yeah, really, really strong start there for the Eels. I thought in general the backline looked really good. Sienna Bonello and Freedom Crichton Rapati both had really nice moments on the wing. Sharon Latapu had that little try she scored was a little kick ahead for herself in the red zone. So nice little bit of vision and execution there. I thought the forwards were excellent. Leonie Ave, we saw her last year 60. She was dominant. Same with Mitzi Cairns, Katia Duff. On the bench, Meta Sivo. They all had big impacts in this game. And then the captain, Bailey Ma Chong, we flagged her in a podcast recently as one of those players to watch in the upcoming upcoming season, with her dynamic ability to play around the middle from dummy half. And she flashed that in this game. A couple of really nice runs to set up bigger plays from out of her own half. So really good start there for the Eels and the Lisa Fiola. And then likewise in the Tasha Gale, where I thought the Eels were very impressive. 54-12 victors out at Canberra. The 2 tries the Raiders scored, to their credit, they got absolutely swamped by the Eels the entire game, but the 2 tries they scored were cracking against the run-of-play tries. Holly Williams took a kick return off a contested bomb off her own goal line just about and raced the better part of 95 metres to score, and Gabriella Savage had a nice length of field try after they kicked ahead early from their own half. But beyond that, the Eels just dominated this one. I said in my wrap-up on Monday that you could have just about written a paragraph on each player praising everyone's efforts, because that's how good the team effort was. But again, the backline was excellent. I thought the centres did a great job getting involved early on for ruck work. That's Alawala and Fasavalu Farmasuli. I thought Aliyah Sufan looked really comfortable at number 7. Then you look in the forward pack, and again, just the entire pack looked great. Armani Leah Ava'a and Kalia Gray were dominant in the middle. Gray's ability to ball play in front of a line tormented the Raiders. I think she had 3 tries this 60s, including a double to her fellow forward, Taylor Falanico. And then the 2 back rowers who we had big raps on coming to this season because of their prior efforts in the pathways, as well as playing in the Harvey Norman Women's Premiership last year. But Fontaine Tafua and Riverly Arlo, the captain, were both brilliant. Canberra didn't have an answer to them. So really, really great team effort across the board here. Also a shout out to the winger Aaliyah Scrivens, who went 9 from 9. We've had very high standards for goal kicking in the women's pathways because of Alicia Bell, and she stepped into her boots perfectly in round 1 here, so well done to Aaliyah there. And as I said in my wrap-up 60s, the only criticism, and it's not even really a criticism I could level at the team, was because of how dominant they were, I didn't get to see them do any defence, like any serious defence. They defended strongly in what they had to do because of the weight of possession. but defensively they were not tested at all, barring those two, freak tries. So that's my big question mark heading into round 2, is that when the game's a little bit more of a neutral script and they're in a bit of a grind through the middle, how do they look defensively? But beyond that, they were fantastic. Just a really, really good looking team there, and that's a tribute to Shah Henry and the crew there for getting them into round 1 shape so well.
Well, mate, you're tagging me in now as I look at the boys' results, and it was an absolute nail biter in the Harold Mats.
Oof.
When to say a nail biter, I mean literally the final second delivered the winning try to the Eels, and look, it was one of those games where I thought that the Eels always felt like they were going to win it, but I don't know whether their discipline just wasn't good enough, but they certainly had a run of decisions that went against them. Look, there were some errors where they were their own worst enemies, but they had a run of decisions that went against them, and it went from the Eels having what should have been a comfortable halftime lead of something like 18-6 to 18-12 at halftime, and the reason for that was there was a charge down kick right on halftime itself to the Knights. They scored in the corner, superb conversion from the Knights from the sideline to get it to that 6-point game. The second half was you talked about the girls not seeing enough of them having to defend. Well, the Eels had to do some defence in the Harold Mats. There was so many really well executed line dropouts from the Knights. Kicks that drew out a line dropout from the Eels from the Knights. So their short kicking game was really on song there, and unfortunately, the Knights drew to 18 all, and then this real extended period of having to defend the line came for the Eels, and it looked like they'd managed to turn the Knights away time and time and time again. And eventually there was an error that was made, but the referee judged that the Eels had interfered in the ruck right in front of the post, and there was like 2.5 minutes to go, and the Knights took the penalty goal, and they thought, that's it, they've got a 20-18 lead, they're going to win. And then the only option was the short kickoff. The Eels executed a short kickoff that didn't look as if it was going to go the 10 metres. When it landed, it bounced towards the Knights. They fielded the ball. It looked like that's it. Late call, probably from the touch judge, that went the Eels' way, said that the Knights had touched the ball inside the 10. It allowed the Eels to get into the Knights' quarter. And then we saw a big charge from Samuel Polly, got pulled down about half a metre out, and then the ball went right to Stephen Nunn, and he just crashed over for the try, literally as the siren was sounding. And we had Zane Alameddine kick the goal to make it a 24-20 result. Zane was actually perfect off the tee with that for the 4 from 4. But mate, the tension, and
too much for round 1. Yeah. Too much.
Oh, absolutely. And look, you'd have to think the Knights are going to be tough in that grade. So it was good 2 points to get away from home. I was really impressed with the Eels forwards. I thought that middles like Nunn and Adard and Polly did a really good job. But I mean, that's singling out some players for workload and probably a couple of highlights in both attack and defence. The winger, who I think was a late inclusion, Samuela.
Samuela Sorovi, yeah.
Sorovi. My apologies there, Samuela. I was trying to think how am I going to pronounce the name? Is there a different way to pronounce it? But Samuela Sorovi. He had a couple of big moments, but none bigger than the intercept try.
12-point turnaround. Yeah.
Oh, the Knights were scoring in his corner for certain, and he's taken the intercept probably 5 metres out from his own line, and he's gone the distance to score at the other end of the field, and that took the Eels out to that 18-6 lead, and it could have been 12-all instead. It could have been then that the Knights might have gone ahead into the sheds, but anyway, got out of jail with that one. The Eels. Probably not the way that coach Josh Hodgson would have liked it to have started in terms of the tension, but in terms of the points, he'd be very happy with that. The SG Ball, they had a really impressive preseason. They scored over 100 points in the 3 games. They only conceded about 24, and they've come out and they've defeated the Knights 36-10.
Very contextually, that's a very impressive win. 60s. Newcastle have been finalists or semi-finalists in the last 3 years of the SG Ball, and they obviously met the Parramatta Eels back in 23 when the Eels trumped them for the title. So they are one of the high caliber teams in this grade, and to go to their place in round 1 and beat them by plus 26 is very, very impressive. Yeah,
look, there's probably too many players for me to single out, but I'd again put a big tick beside the forwards. I thought that they got the job done. The Eels' physicality really won this.
Yeah, agreed. They were just too strong on both sides of the ball through the middle. You highlight him in the trials. Christopher Petrus looked really good on the edge. Yep. Mason Ong, who we saw in the mats last year, looked dynamic at lock forward. Great leg speed.
Well, I think he was one that, when I was talking to you, I said, Mason Ong, he's coming ahead in leaps and bounds. And, you're always very guarded in talking about junior representative players because, for a start, it's a team game and never more so than when you're talking about junior representative teams. And as a coach, you're looking for players who not only look good themselves, but they make others look good around them. And you want the team first philosophy. So it almost feels contradictory to single out players as having fine performances. But, as supporters, we will identify, players that have had very good games. And it doesn't mean that we're not acknowledging the work of the other players. It's just, where there might have been some big moments that were worthy of noting, and certainly Mason Ong, when he was put into space, like breaking the line, I wouldn't have liked to have been the fullback.
No, he had the leg speed and the aggression to really take on anyone that was in his way with those 2 tries. But yeah, he looked really good. And like you said, we're hiring individuals here, but as a team, this was an excellent performance. Starting pack were great. I thought the interchange forwards did a fantastic job. Tom Summer looked really handy through the middle. Wesley Pagoda got big minutes on the edges. And you had the 2 big boppers in Ryder Talangi and Mark Williams that did a great job deputising Lucian and Popo in the front row. So really good forward performance there. Lincoln Fletcher, first year SG Ball half here, junior year of eligibility. I thought he looked really sharp 60s. He's got a new partner in Cameron Bamblett who's come to the Eels by way of Penrith. I'm really keen to see that partnership start to flourish. And then, the backline was just really solid. I think it was Dom and Anders on the left, and then Lockie and Larima on the right, and they just did their job. And that's everything you want in round 1, just your guys doing their jobs. So
interestingly, in terms of the fullback,
Nathan Howlett,
yeah, because he was playing centres.
Yeah, I believe it was in the centres for Mats, and I always crack the joke with that. Howlett's got a bit of a pedigree in rugby union in the back line, so maybe this will be the making of him. I thought he looked good at fullback. He just did again, going back to doing your job really well. I thought that Nathan did a really tidy job at fullback, and the way the rest of the team was playing, that was just perfect. Just having a guy that was really tidy, chiming in at the right place at the right time, meant going back to keeping your team, on schedule, on target. That's exactly where the Eels were in round 1.
Yeah, well, I guess the forwards really laid a good platform because the the spine as well. They had strong games, and you've already mentioned all those players, and of course Lockie Kanikis, the Australian schoolboys dummy half. Look, I must say that since last year, Lincoln Fletcher, he keeps surprising me. He keeps coming up with something a little bit more.
Another string to his bow, another step, another gear.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I have it in the back of my head that before at junior club level, he might have been playing at fullback.
I believe he has spent time at fullback, yeah. Because for the Australian schoolboys, he switched between fullback and halves as well.
Yes,
so there's clearly a few coaches out there that see his positional versatility, or at least his skill set being able to match a few different, very demanding positions. And he's really handled it all and just gotten better. So he looked very sharp here. Great poise and just the ability to hold the ball up and change shape for the defensive structures for the Knights really caused them a lot of issues. So really, really good opening game from him. And like I said, with a newcomer and Cameron Bamblett in the team, I'm really keen to see how that partnership grows in the coming 2 months.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, mate, let's quickly just jump into a quick preview of those junior rep matches where we're going to split duties again this week, except we're swapping around.
Yes, you're going to take the ladies and I'll take the fellas.
Yeah, I'm heading up to Kenthurst to cover the girls. You're looking after the boys' games that are happening at Mascot. So we'll look at those girls' games first. We've just spoken about how the Eels performed. John, do you want to just do a really quick read through of the team sheet for the girls? First of all, the Lisa Fiola.
Yeah, coming up against the Bears at Hillsgrove and Kenthurst, as you mentioned. Bears got trounced by the Bulldogs, who, to the Bears' defence, the Bulldogs are phenomenally talented in the junior pathways for the Fiola and Gale. So not a shocking result there. But for the Eels, looking at this, it doesn't look like there's many, if any, changes, which is a fantastic thing after a round 1 victory. At fullback, you got Ire Sevilla, Sienna Bonello, and Freedom Crichton Rapati on the left and right wings, respectively. Then you got Cody Tuomaseve and Hine Rikiti in the centres. Sharon Latapu and Tamike Withers in the halves. Leonia Vey and Isabella Bell are the bookends for Bailey Ma Chong at dummy half. On the 2 edges, Kazan Morgan Pritchard and Mitzi Cairns. Katia Duff is the lock forward and I believe captain. No C on the team list, but it was there for the New South Wales Rugby League game day centre. On the interchange, you've got Riley Cash, Mere Sivo, Olivia Saba, and Evelyn Kawendu. The reserve player is Georgia Wanzi. And they kick off at 10 o'clock a.m. on Saturday, 60s.
Yeah, so, look, there's probably not much more to say because you've already outlined the overwhelming win that the Dogs had over the Bears last week. We do bear in mind, as you rightly pointed out, that the Bulldogs have absolutely gunned teams in the female pathways, but you'd have to think that based on the 2 first-round performances that the Eels would be going in favourites, and I'd be tipping them to continue on their winning ways. Again, it's on the road. It's almost an Eels home match.
2 away games in the junior reps to start a season is pretty rare. That's a treacherous stretch for the Eels, and if they can get through it 2-0, that is a massive boost for both squads.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, mate, let's jump into now the Tarsha Gale.
Yes, same place, same venue, same team, 11:30 a.m. kickoff. So the Eels look like this, backing up off their big win against the Canberra Raiders. Dallas Graham Wivel at fullback, Nellie Thomas and Aaliyah Scrivens on the flanks, Jessamine Alawalai and Maria Fasavalu Farmasuli in the centres. Sammy Lee Gunn Ta'awai and Aaliyah Sufan are in the halves. Front row sees Armani Lee Avae and River Lee Arlaw as the 2 bookends, although River does have the 13 on her back. Rory Mueller is the dummy half once again. Back row is Fontaine Tafua, Matoishi Kalepo, Kalea Gray. Then on the interchange, Tess McWilliams, Ava Jones, Taylor Falanico, Alana O'Loughlin, the extended players, Shia Tokolich and Anahira Pa'akau. And yeah, Bears also not enjoying a good result in round 160s, taking on the mighty Bulldogs, who prevailed 48-4. So the Eels on paper should be favourites coming into this one, but road games are always tricky, and you certainly aren't counting your wins before you get the job done. But hopeful that the girls can come out of this one 2-0 on the record sheet.
Yeah, and look, that loss 48-4 to the Dogs. I mean, given how good the Dogs are, perhaps that was quite a strong performance from the Bears,
Yeah, perhaps.
Relatively speaking. But look, that it was a strong result from the Eels Tasha Gale team last week. It wasn't without fault, and that's the thing, is it was a strong performance, but it had something that that could be built on through coaching points that were offered there during the game. So look, I think it's going to be a comfortable win for the Eels, and I'm fairly confident they're going to start the season 2-0.
Yeah, I like it. I am also tipping an Eels win here. I thought they looked very good in round one, and I'm expecting to back up come against the Bears. And that takes us to the Harold Mats and the SG Ball. These ones taking place out at Mascot Oval, so closer to the airport up that way. 2:30 p.m. kickoff in the Harold Mats. Eels taking on the Roosters, and the Roosters coming off a first start loss against the Bears 60s, 28-26. It was a tight one, but the Bears did get the chocolates, and we know that the Eels had a tight win against Newcastle. So two teams positioned very similarly, but just on different sides of the ledger after one round. Looking like this for the blue and gold. At fullback, Cyrus Bloomfield. You got Chris Mawala and Kobe McCloskey on the flanks. Cordell Pritchard and Epapara Tahu Apiata round out a bit of a change backline there. In the halves, Talon Rosati and Zane Al-Mandine reprise their roles respectively at 6 and 7. Front row sees Mark Peterson into the starting team for Steve Nunn, who's out. So perhaps injury or suspension at play there for one of the Eels' better players in round one. Chase Attardo stays in the other role at prop. Hayden Bell, dummy half. On the edges is Michael Nower and Kasinga Noah. And then rounding out the unchanged back row is Samuel Polly. On the interchange, Billy Fanene, Retrick Smith-Jessup, Strans Schmalkel, and Zach Withers, with the two reserves being Jermaine Fa'ofiu and Riley Davis. So a few changes there for the Eels, 60s across all three phases, really, the back line, the forward pack, and the interchange. And they're going to have to find that cohesiveness in the coming days ahead of that Saturday kickoff to beat another traditional, pretty strong team in the Mats. The Roosters aren't powerhouses in the Mats, but they're usually a pretty tough opponent, and they've got the advantage of the home field this week, so going to be a tough one.
Yeah, interesting that they had that first up loss against the Bears. That's the the Bears might be unusually strong in the Harold Mats. So we do know that they have in the past picked up a lot of players from Parramatta, from Penrith, from West Tigers that didn't make the cut for the representative team. So it'd be interesting to find out if they are a stronger team, and with being indicative from that first round win, if they can continue that sort of winning form, what the background of some of those Bears players is. But mate, let's move on now to the SG Ball.
Yeah, so the final game in the quartet of junior rep matches in round 2 is a 4 o'clock kickoff at Mascot Oval. Eels look like this with Nathan Howard at fullback. You got Dom Ferrugia and Anders Johansson on the left, Lockie Vella and Marima Rokosuka on the right. Cameron Bamblet and Lincoln Fletcher round out that unchanged 1-7. Bo Lucian and Max Popo are the bookends for Lockie Konikis at dummy half. Josiah Funa Ayuda and Chris Petrus are on the edges. Mason Ong at lock forward, meaning that should be an unchanged 1-13, so it's good news for the Eels there. And speaking of unchanged, the bench, true to their round 1 configuration, Tom Summer at 14, Wesley Pagodi 15, Ryder Talangi and Mark Williams 16 and 17 rounding out the rotation. 3 extended players named there, Corey Lee, Michael Filalava and Phoenix Tawasa, who was one of your trial standout 60s, so the Eels obviously got some very healthy competition for spots there, and they're taking on a Roosters team that looked much sharper compared to their Mats compatriots in round 1. They dismantled the Bears, the plural, 56-12. So going to be a really interesting matchup because the Eels looked really good against Newcastle. Obviously, the Roosters were dominant against the Bears. Again, home field advantage for the Tricolours. And this is the sort of early season test you like to have to figure out where your charges are relative to the competition.
Yeah, I believe that the Eels, the Roosters, and I think Wests might be some early tips to feature high up on the SG ball table this year. I'm going to have to go with the Eels to win this based on just the physicality that they've displayed over those first few weeks. You know,
From the trials to round one, yeah.
Yeah, and the high value they place on their defence. So, well, mate, that just brings us now to the musical interlude.
Yeah, we're going back to our roots this week, 60s. It's just me and you on the podcast. There's no guest host. And going back to the OG intermission music, and it fits nicely because there's a bit of a lull right now in the preseason as we await the crescendo that the trial is going to bring. We talk about that chaos in the coming fortnight. That's starting to crest, starting to come. But for now, a little bit of elevator music. That doesn't want to
stand by.
If that doesn't want to make you make idle, awkward small talk, I don't know what will.
Technical difficulties.
Yeah,
mate.
Exactly. Technical difficulties. But that is the mood right now, as we're sort of in that lull, in that not purgatory, but that in between, with the junior reps having given us a taste of football, and they're in action again this week. But you want the main course now, and it's just a little bit off still.
Yeah, just a little bit. But, mate, we're going to really power through the NRL news because there's not a whole lot about. No. We'll start off with the fact that we've got the Vegas teams in their preseason challenge right now this weekend. So for those people who've been hanging out to get on with the football, your prayers have been answered because we've got the Sharks taking on the Warriors on Friday night, and it seems like both teams have named pretty strong lineups.
Yeah, it's contrasting strategies from the four teams here because both games are at Shark Stadium. It looks like on the Friday and the Saturday for the two fixtures. But Sharks and Warriors are taking this very seriously. They've named essentially full strength lineups, pending on guys that might be a little bit nicked up, or guys pushing for some competition. But the Panthers and the Raiders have named cup teams. So really interesting contrasting strategies here.
Yeah, with the odd exception.
With the odd exception, yeah, exactly. There's some new faces that you'd expect, or some rising players that are looking to push into the mix. But yeah, looking at the Sharks team, you got Will Kennedy, Sione Katoa, Moeni Hiroti, Kyle Iro, and Samuel Stonestreet. Dan Atkinson and Niwai Puru round out the back line there. So Kennedy, Katoa, Iro are all staples that back line. Hiroti's been a handy backup for him, but Stonestreet's one of those rising players that we've looked at 60s. They've named Hamanuele, Hazelton, Talakai, and Kalfusi in the forward pack of notable starters there. So a lot of big names there for the Sharks. On the flip side, Nickel Clockstar, Watine Zalesniak, Pompey, Cozy, Tamari Martin, Luke Metcalf, James Fisher-Harris making his club debut for the Warriors, Wade Egan, Mitch Barnett, Kurt Capewell, Aaron Clark, another new recruit, but it's a very credentialed NRL player, Murata Niokore on the interchange. So plenty of frontline players there for those two teams on Friday night, so it should be a pretty good game. I know there's going to be a lot of rust to bang out in the first game, of course, and we're expecting some errors and penalties to be blown because of various interpretations from officials, but that should be a good one on paper.
Yeah, and both teams really going into their depth charts.
Oh yeah, they've named like another 12 players beyond the normal 17.
Yeah, but it's they're especially going into the depth charts with the match between the Panthers and the Raiders because the starting teams are depth players, a lot of them.
Yeah,
and then we're going even deeper in that reserves list, but some players of interest for Eels supporters because in the Raiders, you've got Ethan Sanders starting the game at halfback. You got Miles Martin starting the game at lock forward. So, and then for the Panthers, you've got Isaiah Papali'i who is starting the game in the back row. But apart
Easily
from
the
that,
highest profile player for Penrith there.
Yeah,
There's first graders or fringe first graders, Dane Laurie, the McLean brothers, Brad Schneider, Jack Cole, Luke Summerton, and Maverick Geyer and Matt Isey are all, thereabouts on the periphery of first grade, but it's a cup team.
Look, mate, I'm just looking forward to seeing a little bit of football.
Yeah, you take what you can get at the moment.
Exactly right, mate. Exactly right. Okay, moving on quickly. There's been conjecture around the NRL looking at introducing some changes around the sin bin for high shots.
This will be part of the preseason challenge, actually. It's not going to go ahead. There are no official changes for the season 2025, hallelujah. But this is going to be trialled in the 2 rounds of preseason challenge games. So they're talking about the ability for the bunker and then the main officials, obviously, to have the retroactive ability to punish someone for a high shot. So when someone inflicts a high shot and a player goes for their mandatory concussion test or pseudo-mandatory, depending on what the teams want to do sometimes, when they go for their concussion test, should the player fail that concussion test, the idea behind this motivation is that the officials then have the ability to then retroactively further punish a player for sin bin or send off or something like that, the one that did the initial infringement. So what was maybe a normal regulations are the right word, is it 60s, but a conventional high shot that didn't look too bad initially, but if it goes on to that player would fail a HIA, the way it's proposed, it makes it sound like that they could then go and sin bin that player once the HIA test has failed. So
yeah,
it's
mate,
one of
if we were to hold up the sign, try or no try, I'd almost go try on that, because there's plenty of times
in good faith, I feel like this isn't a terrible idea. It's one of those ones, but you know what was also in good faith not a terrible idea? The 6 again. It's one of those ones where in an ideal world, I think that this has a lot of merit. I just feel like it's going to be, if it were to ever see the light of day in the NRL, it would be policed wildly, inconsistently. It opens the door for clubs to then incentivize malicious compliance with HIAs, where they can weaponize a player failing the HIA to take out a key player from the other team and then invoke their 18th player. I don't know.
Surely not. Surely not.
Surely not. But I don't know. I think there is merit to the concept. I'm not just here to shit on the NRL for looking to continue to push the frontiers with concussions and player welfare. I think there is merit. I want to see it tested extensively in the preseason across maybe a couple of seasons before we start introducing it to the main format.
What I'm more concerned about is the next one, which is the emphasis on the play the ball and the 10-metre compliance.
The NRL special.
You know that if this is emphasised, that emphasis is going to last for about 5 or 6 rounds, and then it's going to disappear. And because it's the referees aren't perfect. They're not going to pick up every time it happens. They won't pick it up every time it happens. You're going to get pissed off. You are just going to be pissed off. And then we're going to get halfway, 2/3 of the way through the season, and we're going to be talking about, remember how at the start of the year they were talking about cracking down on this? Look at these play the balls. Look at that play the ball. Now, we know players should play the ball properly, but they don't. Now, the cynic in me, the dreamer in me, I should say, would go, geez, the Panthers are really bad at those play the balls. Get stuck into them. Bring them back to the field where they've got to play the ball properly and stop getting on this quick roll that they do. Now, Panther supporters, any of you that are listening, no, I'm not just picking on you, because I know you're not the only ones that do that. You're just the best at doing it, as evidenced by the titles that you hold. But, yeah, the cynic in me says, this will stick for a few weeks and then that'll be over. So, I think enough said on that, mate. And lastly, maybe something that everyone is prepared to stand and cheer if they're able, again, to get the calls right, which, given that it's a subjectivity issue, looking at players in an obstruction situation, they can't take a dive. There has to be like a genuine attempt that they're going to be involved in the tackle. And if people are taking a dive, that'll be looked into in deciding whether something's a try or not, or something's obstruction or not. So sounds another one of those ones that sounds fine in theory, mate. Let's hope it comes in practice.
Obstruction has just been a bugbear for so long, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Absolutely. Well, look, that's actually us powering through the NRL news. How have we come in for the podcast?
Hour 5, so not too bad. A lot of Parramatta talk in a quiet week, but with the entire round of junior reps to review and preview, obviously we managed to waffle on, but good to have some Parramatta football and more on the horizon.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of little reminders. Again, look out for our chat with Parramatta League's club president, Greg Monaghan, that we'll be recording tomorrow. And we're talking about all things Parramatta, be it the League's club development, the resolutions for the League's club constitution, what's happening with the Eels this year, match days down at the club, all that sort of stuff. So have a listen to that. There's so much that we have to get through with Greg, and I think you're going to find it informative, especially around this Parramatta Live development that's going on down there, because that's going to be a big factor for the Eels and the Leagues Club moving forward. So shout out to Parramatta Leagues as well, because they are great supporters of our coverage of Junior Rugby League. Shout out to Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta, Greg and the team, and their continued support of the Cumberland Throw. Our thanks to you, our listeners, and our readers on the Cumberland Throw. The figures that are coming in now for people that are visiting the site are absolutely through the roof. We hit the 5 million mark. We went over 100,000 for January. We've been averaging about 4,000 or 5,000 visits per day in February. It's just blowing our minds. The footy season hasn't even started yet, and people are coming to the Cumberland Throw to get their Eels news and to listen to a couple of fellow Eels fans talk about the footy. So we're humbled and we're really appreciative of that. And no matter what the platform is that you're listening to the podcast on, if you can give it a like and subscribe, that just helps to take it out there to more and more Eels supporters and build our community of Parramatta Eels supporters. John, thank you. Again, thank you to our listeners. And as always say, go you mighty Eels.